In my experience, one of the most rewarding things about Marvel Snap is when you create your own deck and you bring it to ladder and it performs well. It's about the journey of how you started with maybe a combination of cards and you put together 12 cards that you thought would work together well, and all of a sudden you're 10 ranks higher than you were yesterday. It's a really nice feeling, and it doesn't happen all the time. So in this video, I'm going to give you some tips on maybe how we can engage in that feeling. We can create our own decks and build off of it and hopefully have some ladder success. Now, mind you, this is deck building 101. This is going to be a lot of entry level beginner stuff. If you're familiar with TCGs, this is going to feel pretty basic, but it's important stuff. I mean, I often forget about it and then I lose some of that fun feeling from Snap because I get too caught up in a certain meta and I don't challenge myself to try and build something new. So I think that can be a really rewarding experience. So we're going to start it off. The first thing I'm going to tell you about deck building is that you should net deck. I mean, face it, it's kind of what you're doing right now. You're trying to figure out how you can build your own deck. A lot of the times you're probably just looking for a deck that you can find. You copy the code to your Snap and then you paste it to your clipboard in your happy days and you got your deck and you hit ladder. Fair game. The only thing I'll say about that is that maybe you don't have the deep level of understanding that you might require from a deck, the combinations that you should be engaging with. And in Snap particularly, you might not know when to snap or when to retreat while piloting that deck. But I think that net decking, in my personal experience, is a great way to find inspiration for a deck. Very often I will hit the internet looking for decks to find new combinations that I might not have explored yet. I take the essence of that deck and then I either fill it with the cards that I have available to my collection, or maybe there's a combination that I would prefer to run with the core combination of that deck. So I just add and pick and choose a couple different cards. It's a really fun and quick way to get on the ladder with a deck that you haven't quite experienced yet. A few people I recommend that I use all the time. Number one, Milky Snap. I use this guy all the time. Milky is such a killer when it comes to deck building. You have to check him out. He's got good tutorials on his YouTube channel, so be sure to take some of those decks. And then Dara JN, oh my gosh, he's probably the genius of Marvel Snap. If you don't know Dara, he is the one that created the Leech Leader combo before anybody was running it. For a long time, people thought those cards were trash, and then he put them together in a deck, countered the meta, and absolutely turned Marvel Snap's meta upside down. Just absolutely shocked the world there. And then you got Binks. Binks is always putting out different decks all the time. What I really like about Binks is that he goes for an element of fun. His decks have all kinds of crazy combinations. Maybe they're not going to always be the best. He has some really good ones, but they're always going to be a good time. So anyways, I just recommend checking out some of those people. And there's so many more creators out there. I'm only just throwing in a couple that I refer to frequently, but definitely just check them out. Net deck for inspiration. You can still build your own deck while inspired from others. Another way is recognizing your playstyle and strengths. Certain people in playing Snap tend to perform better when they're piloting certain decks. For instance, I don't really like running Mr. Negative decks. They never seem to work out for me. Yeah, there's a little bit of element of luck. You have to acquire the cards to ramp into Mr. Negative, play them on time, blah, blah, blah. But it just doesn't ever seem to work out for me. Yet a lot of people claim that it brings them to infinite, and they do very, very well. But myself personally, I have always found more success with destroy decks. Maybe it's because the locations that keep coming out benefit destroy decks. I don't know, but it seems to be my bread and butter. So I usually go and build those kind of decks when maybe there's a new location that's out, or I really want to grind some rank. I'll go to and play to my strengths. So just try to find your own strengths, and the only way of doing that is by playing a variety of decks, and you're going to start to figure out what clicks for you. Okay, but after you've gotten to those basics out, then we can go to the collection tab in Marvel Snap, and you can filter by keywords. This is going to allow you to look at all the cards of that keyword and see maybe some that you haven't really made use of yet. For instance, I have a combination right here. Combinations are a great starting point, right? So you look at the keywords, you find a card, you see a combo, and you're like, yeah, I want to make use of that. So we were looking at discard cards, and all of a sudden we saw Lady Sif. Okay, that's going to discard the highest cost card in my hand. That's great. And then Ghost Rider is going to return it. And actually, that's a 3 cost, then a 4 cost. That could work really well on curve. So what if I end up discarding Infinite because it's the only 6 cost card that I'm running, or I'm running a few and he's one of them. And then we can discard him, and then on turn 4, I can return him at that same location with Ghost Rider, and bam, that's 23 power on turn 4. We're probably in a good spot. So that combination is a really good starting point for building a deck. And it all derived from that keyword, discard. I just happened to be filtering by discard, found that combination, and I wanted to try it out. So I have 3 cards, I have 9 left to go. As you might imagine, from there, we could kind of take it with a discard route. We can have a bunch of cards that discard to ensure that we end up discarding the Infinite and then try and bring him back with Ghost Rider. A natural combination would be a Hela deck, right? She's going to bring back all those discarded cards. So if Ghost Rider whiffs, well, at least we have Hela for later on. You just got to watch out now. We don't want to discard Hela. It will happen. But you can kind of see when you start with this foundation of a deck that you can start to build off of it and create your own creation. You also have to recognize that your collection is separate from everyone else's. So you're not going to have all of the tools that maybe the most popular YouTuber or whatever content creator is going to have. You have to kind of make it up on the fly, take what they're building and then incorporate your own collection into it. So I actually find that extremely fun. I have to figure out the tools that would be best fits for this deck and then just kind of build from there. And then the other big thing that is a recurring theme every week is the hot and featured locations. Building a deck to attune for these locations is so key to grinding rank and trying to get to infinite. I think a lot of people get a big burst when they find that special sauce for those featured locations, and then they grind rank and they jump like 10, 20 ranks while the 48-hour featured location threshold is up, and they can kind of just, like for instance here we have collapse mine. Okay, so collapse mine is when you pass your turn. That's the featured location right now. It destroys all of the rocks that it summons when it pops up. So as you might imagine, all that destroy, that's 4 rocks for your opponent, 4 rocks for you. Death becomes 1. That's a great card. So you build a deck with death, maybe Sunspot, Infinite, that kind of thing. And if you figured that out before your opponents, you're going to be in a really good spot. So playing into the featured and hot locations is a great way to grind rank, and it's going to be the time in Marvel Snap where you can innovate the most. It's, it gets figured out fairly quickly, I find. I think after like a day, everyone's kind of got the idea of what the location is and how to play into it. But for at least a small window, it can be some of the most exciting times in Snap because the meta is just completely shifted. These locations are going to make it so that certain decks are going to thrive over others that might be meta staples when there isn't a featured location. Okay, so we have the foundation. We have an idea of what we want to build. We got a couple cards in the deck. So let's get to our first draft. All right, so we have our first draft. We're just prepping up. We picked our card back because that's one of the most important components when building a deck. And then we're going to go with that combination that I was talking about previously, right? Boom. Okay, so we have the Lady Sif, Ghost Rider, and Infinite combo. Great combination, but I need 9 more cards. So we have to build from here. Okay, so let's think about some synergistic cards, right? So I could clear my filters and have a look at some discard cards, right? Because maybe we want to discard a little bit more stuff. It's a really good combination with Infinite because he has such a high power total, and sometimes you can't get him out of the hand or you can't discard him on time, is Dracula. And I got this cool variant, so why not? Sometimes you got the cool variants, you got to show them off, you got to play those cards, you got to get them in there. So bam, we got Dracula in the deck. Okay, maybe I want some later game stuff. I want some bigger stuff. So let's have a look at some 6 costs. All right, so while I'm looking at the 6 costs, naturally you might be gravitated to Apocalypse, but that doesn't really work with the deck, right? Because if you discard it, then you can't bring it back with Ghost Rider. It's going to come back to your hand. Not really synergistic there. We could go the Hela route, but I have a different plan in mind. In fact, I kind of want America Chavez in the deck. Oh yeah, we got another variant. Let's pop this one in, okay? America Chavez is great because it can thin out our deck, and then we can definitely get that Ghost Rider Lady Sif Infinite combo in a more timely fashion. So she's actually always a great addition in a lot of decks. Also has 9 power. That's great with Dracula if it happens to hit. Another thing that I'm noticing here is that I have 2 4-drops, and there's actually a few I might want to add further. The Season Pass card month was Zabu. So let's go have a look at Zabu and get him in this deck because I think it's a really strong card and I might as well run it if I want to be competitive. All right, so we got Zabu in the deck. might need some more forecasts. So you see how you navigate through the collection system, right? As you're building your deck. You're going to go from one place to the other, and eventually you're going to get close to a finished deck, but you might be missing a few cards that you have to slot in. So once I'm at the forecasts here, I'm thinking that I want high power stuff because overall I want the Dracula to get big, the Ghost Rider to bring something back that's big enough and worthwhile. So I'm actually going to go into my sort cards here and sort by power. And then if I scroll down, I just happen to have it filtered this way. I've got the big power stuff. Now, I don't want Typhoid Mary. I don't plan on playing a 0 deck. So my next biggest one is Crossbones. And you know what? I'm into it. I want to play Crossbones. Hardly ever get to play this card. Got a sick variant. Got to throw him in. Boom. Crossbones. Who's next up to bat? We got White Queen here. White Queen happens to be a good card that not a lot of people were playing until about a month or two ago. But fantastic card. Gets me draw and 6 power. I'll take it. All right, we're looking pretty good. We got high power stuff, but now I might want to cheat it out more, and I still want some 4 drops. So a great card to do that, and we actually just got a fantastic variant for her, and that is Jubilee. So why don't we throw in Jubilee so that we have a chance of cheating out the Infinite or any of our high power cards. All right. So the deck is kind of coming together. I don't do this sort of thing very often, right? Where I'm kind of trying to cheat out things with Ghost Rider, Jubilee. I got the big power stuff, but I'm kind of missing an early curve. So one of the best early curve cards is if we go to our 1-drops, right? And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I have Infinite. I might not be playing a lot early until I get that Zabu out. So why don't we throw in Sunspot? Such a good card, right? Gonna get all that power for the unspent energy that I'm not using. Also, just if I can play it early, it opens up options for later. All right, now we've reached a pivotal point in the deck building phase. I've kind of created my first draft. I have a semblance of an archetype of a deck that I wanted to play, but I have 2 slots remaining. This is where I could put in some tech cards to maybe counter any potential threats. Right now, threats would be anything that could destroy my high power stuff, right? Because I'm planning on cheating those out. If I get the Infinite out early, I don't want them to get destroyed too soon. So a great counter to Shang-Chi is what I'm hinting at would be Cosmo. So if we go and have a look at Cosmo, the risk that we're running here is if I put Cosmo in the deck, now my Jubilee could get countered, my Lady Sif could get countered, my Ghost Rider, my White Queen. I have a lot of on reveals myself. So I have to watch out with Cosmo. I can't necessarily protect off of the Ghost Rider play because I can't play Cosmo before Ghost Rider. So while normally I would like this combination, I think it's a little bit too risky with what we have. So I'm actually going to take out Cosmo, and I think I actually like something like Storm a little bit better, right? We'll put in Storm because, again, we have that Savage Land variant. I'm a little biased with the variants. But then if I can play Jubilee just right after the Storm play or Dracula after the Storm play, there's probably a good chance we're going to win it if we set our hand up right. So I like Storm here. Okay, and lastly, we could flex a lot of cards, and maybe we're going to have to pick and choose and try later on. We'll get to that in a second. But right now, I just feel like I need a higher power card. So I'm actually going to filter by power once again. I'll go to the top so we don't have to scroll all the way down. And then you can see I've already got the Infinite in there. Don't want Destroyer. If I pull that randomly with Jubilee, we're in a bad spot. Red Skull could be an option, but I'm not vibing with that right this moment. I'm kind of feeling like Giganto could be a really nice addition. Between that, or there's a sneaky pick in She-Hulk because I'm already playing up the unspent energy with Sunspot and Infinite, then maybe She-Hulk is my girl. She's also 10 power. Great if I get her off of Ghost Rider or Jubilee, anything like that. Kind of works really nicely with our deck. I'm actually going to end up adding She-Hulk, and then bam, that is our deck. Now this deck, admittedly, I net decked this from Milky Snap. You got to go check them out. That's why. It's something similar to this, maybe a couple of changes, but this deck performs so well. So I was just kind of using this as a basis to understand how you can kind of come to these conclusions when building decks. All right, so we have our deck, which is great, but now you have to play test it. You have to play it over and over and over again to know if it's going to be a successful deck or not. You can't just play a couple of games and say this one's going to get to infinite. You got to try it out. And it might reach infinite for one, but not another. It's subjective to how you want to play the game, how your play style, your strengths, right? And then, but let's say you get new cards. Let's say you get new cards and they actually work better. Like you wanted to build a deck with them, but you didn't have those cards just yet. And then bam, they happen to open up in your chests through pure luck. And it's like, sweet, now I can put that card into my deck, but does the rest of the deck work? So here I have a different example. I have the Silver Surfer deck. This is pretty staple Silver Surfer running a lot of 3 drops. probably run into this on ladder quite a few times with Sarah, Storm, Juggernaut combo. Great deck. Let's say you had a few of these cards, you had a few of these Pool 3, Series 3 cards, but you were missing Maximus, who is often accompanied by Silver Surfer almost in every one of the decks. So you're missing that combo, and then you just unlocked them. Well, you look at your deck and it's like, okay, which one should I take out? Maybe my Captain America isn't pulling as much weight as I want to, or maybe it is. It depends on you. But in this instance, we're going to take Captain America out and put that new card Maximus in, and it works just fine. Sometimes when you get a new card, you're just going to have to build a whole new deck and start from scratch because the card doesn't really synergize with the decks that you currently have. For instance, you can't just throw Lockjaw in every deck. It's fun, but you might not want to do that. Also, you got to be open to swapping out cards and suggestions that maybe people or friends might make. It's hard to get caught up in, no, my deck is perfect, don't touch it, don't ruin it, when really the suggestion they're making might actually be really helpful. So when you have your deck and you're place testing it, you have to keep in mind the combinations that are going to let your deck win. Because in Marvel Snap, it's so important, your cube management. That's probably the most vital thing to laddering up in Marvel Snap. So if you don't know when to snap and you don't know when to retreat, when the cards haven't been dealt the right way, or maybe you absolutely drew the nuts, you have to understand the deck well enough to capitalize on those situations and double down or dip out. And that's only going to come from playing the deck repeatedly. So I just really encourage you to not give up after 1 or 2 games, to try out maybe 10 games is a decent sample size. Okay, you'll have an idea. Maybe if you're hovering at an 80% win rate, then you build something really good. Maybe if you're at 50%, you have to tweak the deck a couple of times. And then maybe if you're at 40%, you got to rework from the start because it's just not quite working out. 40% or lower, that is. So you can track these statistics and win rates through a few different means. The two that I'm familiar with are MarvelSnapZone.com and Snap.fan. They both have their own apps that you can track win rates when you upload your decks. It's a great resource to use, and it's going to be really helpful in your deck building situations. So lastly, I'll just say it again, you have to try these decks out on repeat, but you also have to identify your win conditions. Those are so important in recognizing when you have achieved those and when you haven't to get out. You also have to recognize when your opponent achieved their win cons, right? If they hit the nuts on the board, you got to get out. Especially if they snapped on turn 6 and their board is looking pretty good and they got cards in hand, you got to get out. It's just as important as knowing your deck as it is knowing your opponent's, which luckily in card games, typically there's a meta that develops and people like to play those decks on repeat. So sometimes when you deviate off of the meta, you're going to be in a good spot, which I'm going to talk about in a second here. Beware. Your deck won't win every game. It won't. It just won't. No matter what kind of deck you created, it's not going to have a 100% win rate because that's how the game's designed and that's how it has to be. So don't get caught up in your losses. They're going to come. And especially if you're just in a rough spot during a day. I've had so many days where no matter what deck I'm playing, I face the counter. But then another day where I'm unstoppable on ladder. You just have to, it's all about sample sizes and trying decks out through a period of time. Maybe set a week where you try a deck out a couple games every day and you just track how you do. That's what's going to give you a good idea if the deck is working for you or not. But also new cards are added every week in Snap. Now you probably don't see a whole lot of them, but some of them have been meta defining, particularly the season pass cards. So if we look at some of the most recent cards that were released, Black Panther actually did shake up the meta somewhat. It created a Black Panther Arnim Zola combo, which made Cosmo all that much more important to have in your decks to protect from that combination. Otherwise, didn't make too big of a splash. Silver Surfer, though, made a huge splash in the meta. So much so, at the bottom there, you can see that a entire deck was created to counter this and take over the meta. Silver Surfer was running rampant. So much power on turn 6 when you play a couple of 3-drops and your Silver Surfer, because maybe you set up Sarah the turn prior, right? So it's just an insane turn. But you know, Silver Surfer is absolute garbage if it doesn't trigger its ability, if it's just a 3-0. So Dare JN decided, you know what's a great combination is Leech on 5, Leader on 6. Leech them so they can't do any of their combination. If they still want to play out the turn because maybe they think they have enough power in hand, you copy it with Leader and GG's, you just stole 8 cubes. So that deck literally spawned because Silver Surfer became popular. So you just have to watch out from these shifts in the meta when new cards are released. It will not happen every time. For instance, the last 3 cards, Sauron, Shanna, and Dazzler, I haven't even seen. That's a problem with the game's economy, and I've talked frequently about that. But it's also, you know, just the thing, if the card's power level isn't really there, it's not going to affect the meta, okay? Sometimes there's accessory cards that come out that, you know, help a deck get a little bit better. By example, we could talk about Sauron, for instance, right? You know, Sauron works in 0 decks. Is it needed? Not really, but it makes it a little bit more consistent, so it's kind of decent there. But it's not going to completely turn the meta over its heels and change everything that we know. You know, Zabu, Silver Surfer, these were cards that kind of did that. Zabu being one of the more cracked cards out there right now, okay? And then there's going to be balance changes. They do it every month. They're not always that big, but they can actually make an impact. You know, 1 power here, 1 power there might make a big difference. Anyways, that's going to be the basics on deck building. I hope this helped. I hope it inspired you to maybe go out and build your own deck. It can be a very rewarding experience when you build something somewhat unique, share it with everybody else, and have a good time and actually win some cubes. It's why I think I like doing snap drafts so much, because it's just random and I get to use cards that I don't normally use in decks and hit the ladder and see how well they do. If you have any other deck building tips that I didn't cover here, please let us know below. It would be really helpful for the community. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.